The Doug Wright Show. Top newsmakers only Doug has access to. Answering questions only Doug can ask on KSL News Radio.
You know, ever since the breakup of the Jordan School District, I've been watching this very, very closely. We ended up with Canyons on the east, the Jordan School District on the west, and since this was a kind of a forced breakup, let's put it that way, it's been amazing to watch the challenges that were left behind by this, and it has been amazing. It's been in some ways inspiring and in some ways disheartening to see some of the challenges and some of the really difficult things, especially that the Jordan School District has been left to deal with. And a couple of years ago, they went for a huge bond to handle some of the building infrastructure problems that the Jordan School District was left with. They went for $495 million, as you just heard Peter Seymour indicate, and boy, that just got wiped out by the voters, 67% to 32%. And here we are a couple of years later. That was 2013. Here we are 2016. And now the Jordan School District is proposing a $245 million bond for 6 new schools. As I was reading the stories, just under 10,000 additional new students will be expected in the Jordan School District in the next 5 years. So obviously some very unique challenges are facing that district, and I am so pleased that this morning we are being joined by the president of the Jordan School District, wanted to get the title right, Dr. Susan Pulsipher, who joins us on the line. And Dr. Pulsipher, thank you for taking time to join us here at KSL.
I'm very pleased to be here, be with you.
You know, we've all kind of watched this over the last now considerable period of time, and the challenges that were left, I think especially in the lap of the Jordan School District and trying to deal with the breakup of that district years ago. And here we are, and now Jordan is determining that there is a real need for schools, and I think there was a real need for schools 3 years ago as well, but the voters did not quite bite off on the $500 million. What do you see, and I want to talk specifics where this money will go, but what are the vibes out there right now, Dr. Pulsipher? Are the folks in better temperament on voting for this, and especially the smaller amount?
You know, we have worked really closely with our community during the last 3 years, particularly our cities. We have 5 cities located in Jordan School District, and we have created a plan for growth, and it's a rolling plan, so we update it every year based on new numbers and new statistics, and we've gone to each of our cities each year and said, this is what we're looking at. So they understand where we are. They know we have a plan for growth. And because of that, they're behind us and supportive of this new bond in general.
When I look at the growth, especially along the Wasatch Front, there are 2 major areas that just really stand out. One is the Alpine District, and you look at the northern part and especially the northern western part of Utah County, and then clearly the southwest quadrant of the Salt Lake Valley, which of course is where the Jordan School District's epicenter is. And the growth in Harriman, the growth in Riverton, the growth in Daybreak, and it just goes on. West Jordan, South Jordan, the Bluffdale. It is incredible, the growth that you have had in this area. When we talk 9,200, and there'll probably even be more additional new students coming on the docket. What happens if this bond doesn't pass? Where do you put 9,200 kids?
Well, if it doesn't pass, you have to add portables. You have to look at alternate schedules. And the bottom line for us is we want to provide a high-quality education for all the students in Jordan School District. And when you get overcrowded conditions, the quality goes down, and we just feel like that's not something that we want to have happen. It's just not what's best for kids.
So where do we start on this? I'm trying to completely understand the food chain. Now, some of it will be through birth of kids, so you would assume that maybe the focus should be on elementary schools, but a lot of people are moving in too, so they're going to bring their junior high school kids and their high school kids along with them. Where do you start?
Well, if you look at our plan, our 5-year plan for growth, we have 2 elementary schools that we're currently building. And I think the thing that's so exciting about this is in the last 3 years, we've taken a really close look at our budget, and we've been able to make some changes to build those 2 elementary schools without raising taxes. And that's, I think, good news and very exciting for us. And so there's 2 elementary schools, and then if you look at our remaining plan, there's 2 additional elementary schools and 2 middle schools, including a rebuild of a middle school that's 60 years old, and then a high school. So we've kind of covered the whole feeder system with our building plan for the next few years.
It really is remarkable. I was mentioning to my listeners a little earlier in the introduction of what we would be talking about here that when I went to Skyline High School, I ultimately graduated from Granite, but we were the largest school in the state, and I think we had 2,700 students, something like that. That is not an unusually large high school by today's standards, but when you look at 10,000 kids, and it really is, it's the whole deal. It's a high school, it's several of the junior high schools and the elementary schools. It's that whole slice of the pie that a district needs to maintain in order to make sure that everybody can go all the way through the system.
Yeah, and our plan calls basically for a feeder system because 5 elementary schools, the 3 plus the 2 we're building, and then 2 middle schools, and then a high school. And that is essentially a whole feeder system.
You mentioned you went to the individual cities, and you've got some great communities in the Jordan School District. I've talked with many of the mayors and the major players in those areas for various reasons over the last little while, including prison relocation, you name it. Boy, there's a lot of growth in those areas, a lot of pride in those areas. And are you absolutely convinced that you've got the cities behind you solidly on this one, Dr. Pulsiver?
You know, we have talked extensively. Before we actually announced this, we went out to the cities and we spent quite a bit of time talking to the full city councils of each city, and we answered questions, and we said, this is what we're thinking that we would like to do for a bond. We want your input before we even start. We want to know if you have concerns, if we need to make adjustments. We want to know that before we even start. And I think that you'll see a pretty large amount of support from the cities for this bond.
I know you mentioned that a lot of this is kind of rolling out as the growth comes and so on, and there has to be some flexibility. We've talked about the elementary schools and the new junior high schools or middle schools, including a rebuild. But where do you anticipate that a high school would be most needed? What is the critical epicenter for a high school?
We have the high school location that we have looked at and planned for is in the southern part of Harriman, Riverton, Bluffdale,
right.
That area down there in the southwest portion of our district.
You know, one thing that always comes up when we talk about funding for schools, taxes for schools, raising money, a bond for schools, and as I understand it, Doctor, this would be about $16, $17, $18 for, like a $200,000 home is almost a $300,000 home. Is that a correct number?
Yeah, that is. And so we know that it would have $15, $17, $18 impact for a year. And we have to remember it's not per month. That's actually for the entire year.
Right.
But then the good news is we have our existing bonds that will be retiring in about 2021, 22. And at that point, they should see their property taxes actually dip as those bonds retire.
One very quick question, and this is a tough question to give you very little time on, but one argument I always hear when we bring this stuff up is, well, Doug, what they ought to be doing, they ought to be striving for more efficiency. We shouldn't be raising taxes. They should just cut the fat. What would you say to folks that have that attitude?
You know, that's an easy question because we spent 3 years doing that. And we had 3 committees that looked at our current buildings and what we have in our buildings and how we construct our buildings and the methods. We had on these committees parents, members of the community. We had some mayors on the committee as well as construction people. And we went around and looked at buildings in our surrounding districts. And we just took a really hard look at that because we said we want to use tax dollars as effectively and efficiently as possible. And we have been able to reduce construction costs in the 2 elementaries that we're building now by over 17%. That saves millions of dollars on each school for taxpayers. So I feel like that's a wise request and a legitimate request for taxpayers and voters to ask, and I feel like that we've done that, and we can show our voters and taxpayers that we are really trying to be careful and good stewards with tax dollars.
Dr. Pulsipher, we'll keep a close eye on this, and I appreciate your time here at KSL.